Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin.
And I'm Heather Sells. U.S. officials say an American man recruited by the terror group ISIS has been killed in Syria. Officials believe Douglas MacArthur McCain was fighting with the terrorists, but they are still waiting to retrieve his body and verify information about his death. The news comes as the president ratchets up the pressure on Syria and ISIS.
McCain is one of 2 Americans reportedly killed in Syria this week while fighting for the terror group the Islamic State, also known as ISIS. The 33-year-old grew up in Minnesota and went to college in San Diego. One cousin said he had lost his way.
I felt like he may have lost his identity because all of this is not him.
It's believed that jihadist groups in Syria, including ISIS, have recruited some 100 Americans to fight. Back in May, another American fighting for a rival rebel group to ISIS blew himself up in a suicide attack. He left behind this threatening message.
You think you are safe? You are not safe.
ISIS has dominated the headlines, especially in the last week, after killing American journalist James Foley and holding another American hostage, a female humanitarian worker in Syria. The White House is responding with renewed pressure. The president issued this warning on Tuesday.
But our message to anyone who harms our people is simple. America does not forget. Our reach is long. We are patient. Justice will be done.
The president has also authorized surveillance flights in Syria.
This is a serious threat from a serious group of terrorists, and we need to stay mindful of doing what we need to do to protect American citizens at home and abroad.
Earlier this month, the U.S. began launching airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq. The Pentagon is now preparing for the possibility of airstrikes against ISIS in Syria. The president has long resisted taking military action there, but with the growing ISIS threat, it appears that new options are now on the table.
Critics say the president's actions and inactions created the perfect environment for ISIS to grow, allowing a vacuum in Iraq by pulling out all U.S. troops. Joining us now with more is Gail Trotter. She's a writer, attorney, and senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Gail, you wrote on townhall.com that Obama's, quote, stupid stuff foreign policy has had disastrous effects. Explain what you mean.
Yes, President Obama fixated on pulling our troops out of Iraq as a strategic end unto itself. And unfortunately, he consciously chose to throw away all of the strategic gains that we made. He consciously chose to throw them away. And now we're seeing the effects of that. His approval rating on foreign policy his disapproval rating on foreign policy is at an all-time high with the American public, and his former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton made the point that Obama's foreign policy mantra of don't do stupid stuff is not an organizing principle. And in effect, what she was saying is that President Obama's policy is incoherent. And as you just saw in the package, President Obama is making us go back into Iraq and possibly widening the conflict into Syria, but from a position of weakness and a position of instability. We've seen the terrible things that have been going on in Iraq and in Syria. We're going to go back in, but we're going to go back in without the intelligence that we need from a position of strength and with the situation in Iraq in a really difficult place.
Gail, it seems like a no-brainer to launch military strikes against ISIS headquarters in Syria, a terrorist group which has threatened America. Why is President Obama taking so long to decide?
You might remember that a year ago, one of the top points of President Obama's foreign policy was the removal of Assad as the president of Syria. And President Obama drew a red line saying that if President Assad used chemical weapons, that we would act and probably militarily against Syria and President Assad. And you're only 12 months later, now President Obama is boxed into a corner by President Assad, where we're probably going to have to work with President Assad in order to get permission permission to do strikes against ISIS, because now ISIS, as Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel has said, this organization is beyond any terrorist organization that we've ever seen. So President Obama's policy is coming back to be a deterrent to U.S. strategic interests in this area.
And quickly, former New Jersey Governor Tom Keene led the 9/11 Commission, and he recently met with 20 top intelligence officials to prepare the commission's latest threat report. He told ABC News, quote, "One official told me I am more scared than at any time since 9/11. Is it now too late to stop ISIS from becoming a direct threat to the U.S.?
It's not too late, but as I said, we come from a position of weakness, not of strength. And as you know, the National Archives in Washington, D.C., they have inscribed on the heading what is past is prologue. And we see the same type of 7th century dystopian things going in Iraq and Syria that we were seeing in the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan pre-9/11. And unfortunately, we do not want this unholy war brought to U.S. shores again, like on 9/11. But to prevent that, we need to act quickly and swiftly.
All right, Gail Droner with Independent Women's Forum. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you for having me.
50 days after the start of Operation Protective Edge, Israel and Hamas announced an unlimited ceasefire. Even so, one senior Hamas leader says it plans to rebuild its arsenal in Gaza. That's one reason many believe the ceasefire might be a temporary lull in the ongoing struggle between the radical Islamic group and the Jewish state. Chris Mitchell reports.
After the ceasefire announcement, Hamas organized a celebration in Gaza City. Women threw candy, men waved flags, and Hamas spokesman declared victory.
We are here today after achieving an agreement between the two sides to announce the victory of resistance. We are here today to announce the victory of Gaza.
In Israel, experts said Hamas had sustained its worst blow ever and would brag no matter what. Many Israelis sounded relieved but leery.
I'm very, very happy that it happens, but I'm very doubtful about the effectiveness of this ceasefire, because it could be that this is the 14th ceasefire that we are getting in.
The Egyptian brokered agreement stipulates no more rocket fire from Gaza, the opening of the Rafah crossing with Egypt, and expanding fishing rights off the Gaza coast. In approximately 1 month, negotiations will begin on building a seaport and airport in Gaza and the release of Hamas prisoners.
This time, we hope the ceasefire will stick, and I think now that the dust will be clearing, many people will be asking, why is it that Hamas has today accepted the very same framework that they rejected a month ago? So much bloodshed could have been avoided.
Despite the loss of so much life, Hamas sounded defiant and ready for the next round of fighting. A Hamas spokesman said, "The value of this campaign is not in the opening of this crossing or that crossing, but in paving the way for the next phase of liberating Jerusalem and the land of Palestine. Today, we are closer to Jerusalem."
And Chris joins us now from Jerusalem. Chris, why do you think that Israel has agreed to this ceasefire? What does it stand to gain?
What it stands to gain right now, Heather, is that it's going to be quiet on the southern border, at least for a while. But a lot of people, a lot of Israelis here, like I said in the piece, they're relieved but leery, and they feel like one time this is going to happen again. It happened in 2008 with Operation Cast Lead, 2012 and 11 with Operation Protective Edge now, and they feel like this is going to happen again. So they're relieved but feel like it's just one more pause in an ongoing war with Hamas.
And Hamas, of course, is celebrating a victory even though they've been badly damaged. What do you think they have accomplished?
Well, they've survived. I guess that's the one thing they can relate to, and I think they felt like many of their leadership were being targeted by Israel, and I think that's one of the reasons where they came to the negotiating table. I think they lost an awful lot, though. Although you only see these organized celebrations by Hamas, there's a lot of anger and frustration against Hamas within the Gaza Strip. It's a terror organization, so these people can't come out in public and vent their frustrations like you can in Israel. So, but they lost an awful lot. They've lost maybe most of their rocket supply, maybe down from 10,000 to 2,000. They've lost this elaborate tunnel network that they had constructed for years. That's mostly been destroyed, and they plan to have a mega terror attack maybe on the Jewish New Year. So they've lost an awful lot. They've lost prestige within their own population, and it remains to be seen what they're going to do now, how much they can rebuild. But they still remain committed, Heather, to destroying Israel. The Bible says, can a leopard change its spots? And the answer is no. And you heard from their rhetoric in that graphic that they still want to eliminate the Jewish state and they want to capture Jerusalem.
Okay, and Chris, just briefly update us on the situation. We've got Jerusalem police searching for a missing American student. What is the latest on that?
Well, they're very concerned that this could be another kidnapping, and this could be the same thing that happened several weeks ago when much of this fighting began, when 3 Israeli teens, including an Israeli American, were kidnapped. It remains to be seen exactly what's going to happen. No updates yet, other than this initial report that he's missing, and they've uncovered some of his belongings, but they don't know exactly what's going to happen, and they hope that the worst won't be revealed soon.
A lot to keep up with. Chris Mitchell, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Heather.
A whistleblower who exposed the crisis in healthcare at America's veterans hospitals is blasting a new VA report. An investigation of the Department of Veterans Affairs found no conclusive evidence that veterans died while waiting for care. The report did mention 6 veterans who died after delayed care, but it said there was no proof that the delays caused any deaths.
Well, how can you have a clinical significant delay and not have it affect the outcome? That doesn't make sense. They said they were unable to conclusively assert that the absence of care caused the deaths. And that's a very strange statement.
Dr. Sam Foote used to work at the VA in Phoenix. He came forward with these allegations at the end of 2013, but he worries some of the information he handed over to investigators was destroyed. The VA says any potential criminal violations will be presented to federal prosecutors. A separate FBI investigation is still going on.
More startling news today in the IRS scandal involving the targeting of conservative groups. An IRS filing in federal court shows the agency destroyed Lois Lerner's Blackberry after it learned her computer had crashed and after a congressional investigation was well underway. An IRS official said the destroyed Blackberry would have contained the same emails on Lois Lerner's hard drive. A senior IRS lawyer wrote in the declaration, which is part of a lawsuit filed by Judicial Watch against the IRS, the Blackberry was removed or wiped clean of any sensitive or proprietary information and removed as scrap for disposal in June 2012.
Coming up, another startling discovery. You won't believe what neighbors found in this trash can. In Utah, a newborn baby girl is in extremely critical condition after being found in a garbage can. A neighborhood resident found the baby in her trash with the umbilical cord still attached. Police arrested and are questioning the 24-year-old unidentified mother.
They told me that they found the baby out of the garbage can. I don't even talk. I just shocked.
Was transported in what was described as critical condition. It's now in extremely critical condition, and it's being described as really fighting for the infant's life. The potential charges could be child abuse, and God forbid if the child passes away, it could be, could be child homicide.
Pray for that baby. Officials say the baby could have been dropped off at a hospital without any consequences.
Well, by now you have seen the Ice Bucket Challenge that is sweeping the internet. The campaign has raised tens of millions of dollars to fight ALS, a degenerative nerve disease. But one Christian group is warning of a dark side. The Roman Catholic Diocese of Richmond, Virginia, is telling all Virginia parishes and Catholic schools not to send money to the ALS Association. That's because it uses embryonic stem cells in its research, which the diocese says violates the sanctity of life. Now, the diocese says donations should go to groups that use only adult stem cells for research.
Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal plans to file a lawsuit against the Obama administration over Common Core education. Jindal is accusing them of illegally using federal grant money to force states to adopt the standards. The Department of Education has used $4.3 billion in programs and policy waivers to get states to adopt Common Core. The Republican governor is considering running for president in 2016.
Up next, what is worse than a long wait at the doctor's office? How about there not being a doctor's office in the first place? Hear why many doctors are shutting their doors next.
Many Americans are worried about what Obamacare will do to our healthcare system. One of the concerns, the massive influx of new patients.
It comes as doctors are already facing another problem from big government. And as Caitlin Burke reports, it could be bad enough to put your family doctor out of business.
The small town of Farmville, Virginia, has 2 private practitioners, or what we used to know as family doctors. And one of them, Dr. Lawrence Varner, is considering closing his doors after more than 20 years of service.
If anyone finished medical school now and had the least thoughts of opening a solo practice, they would be absolutely insane. It's just no way.
Thanks to increased pressure from the government, Medicare, and insurance companies, Varner says he no longer recognizes the practice of medicine.
I started when things were good. When physicians were physicians and they could do what they thought was best for the patient and not having to crawl and beg to insurance companies to get certain tests approved, certain medicines approved.
Government intervention into the healthcare system was supposed to improve patient care. Instead, doctors say they feel like clerks, stuck behind their computers instead of taking care of their patients. One example of that government intervention is electronic medical records, or EMR. As part of the 2009 stimulus package, physicians received incentives to convince them to buy into EMR. The system promised to make their lives easier. But according to Varner's wife, Linda, it's done the exact opposite.
Overhead's out the roof because it takes more people to do it, and the more requirements they have to, and they said it'd be paperless, and, we were buying more paper than ever, and it's just backfired, and we're never done. Whereas before we were at least done. It was late, but we were done. But with EMR, we're never done.
Time put in at the office seems endless, as do the sacrifices to keep the practice running.
Family, like our youngest, he's 19, but he's still home a lot, and he's like, I'm home, but I'm not really home because y'all are, we physically are there, but we're still working.
An increasing number of doctors are closing their door on private practice. Others are being acquired by hospitals, hoping to combat their loss of revenue. 4 years ago, Dr. Varner tried the route of becoming an employed physician. He laid out 2 conditions. 1, continue working in the building he owns. And 2, keeping his daughter on as one of his nurses.
At the end of 2 years, they decided that they wanted to move me and would not honor the commitment to the office building. And then a month after they told me that, they came and said my daughter could no longer work here.
After the 3-year contract, Varner went back into private practice, where things had only gotten worse during his years working for the hospital.
I'm making the equivalent of $12 an hour, and my wife is making $2.90 since January 1st.
So why not just close the doors? Varner says it's a mix of refusing to be pushed around and a love for his patients who love him back. Ray Fawcett is one of them. He's been seeing Dr. Varner for 25 years.
What would you do if the pressure gets to be too much and he is forced to close the doors of his practice?
The major strain is that Dr. Varner knows our minds and our bodies so well that it takes years for another doctor to build that rapport with us.
Regardless of the intentions of the administration, the results in the medical world are disturbing. Dr. Varner's message to the government: stop being the problem.
I've got the computer system, I got the EMR. Let me use it in a way that suits my practice and my patients, and not because of some rules and regulations that someone that doesn't have a clue regarding patient care has decided that we need to meet. That would be a big, huge step.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Farmville, Virginia.
And finally, today, in the months after Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines, CBN News encountered many tragic stories, but we were especially moved by a pastor and his wife who lost their 3 children.
Now, 9 months after the tragedy, a CBN disaster relief team visited them to see how they are. Lucille Toulousan reports.
Pastor Dante, Dolor, and their 4 children were holding onto the beam of their ceiling, hoping to survive the storm surge caused by Typhoon Haiyan. Unfortunately, the strong waves swept away their house, drowning 3 of their 4 children and 13 other family members, including Dolores' mother and sisters. No words can express Dolores' deep sorrow.
I miss my children so much. We work hard to give them a good future, but all of that is gone. We were serving in church. It's painful because we were feeding the children, and now we lost our own.
9 months later, when the CBN disaster relief team visited Dolores and her family, we noticed a new glow on her face. And that's because she and her family are once again running their feeding ministry for the children.
This was a favorite activity of Pastor Dante and Dolores together with their children who died in the typhoon. But today, as they do the ministry, they say that they are more inspired because not only does this give them beautiful memories of their children, but they also bring healing as they feed and share Jesus to them.
Aside from physical food, Dolores and her husband feed them with spiritual food.
When I am with the children, I don't feel so lonely anymore, and I'm happy to be able to minister to them. We teach them the Word of God because it is important for them to learn how to love God.
To help Dolores overcome her grief and earn some income, CBN presented her a sewing machine that she longed to have. The president of CBN Asia and Operation Blessing, Peter Kairouz, was there to award the gift.
Thank you, CBN and Operation Blessing, for providing this gift that I asked from God.
With Dolores' new source of income, not only is she occupied with her sewing, but she has also found a new means to help more children. Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Tacloban, Philippines.
That's just a precious family and testimony.
I'll tell you what, yeah, God is really using them in spite of everything that happened.
Well, that is it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues that you care most about at cbnnews.com.
And tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here on Facebook and Twitter. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.